Jesus Beloved. Welcome and thank you for joining us in Saugeen Wesley's 6th Sunday of Easter service. I'm Karen Lyons, and it's a privilege to share this time with you. I have to say, I'm missing our real-life gathering time. Jane's piano playing, our singing and praying together, the sharing of stories over coffee, the gentle teasing and laughter that signals affection. I look forward to coming together again at the beloved church where the Great Spirit makes her presence known. We gather today in spirit, trusting in Jesus' promise that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is there. He is here. Let us join our hearts in our call to worship. What does the Lord require of us? With what shall we come before God on high? This is what the Lord requires of us, to do justice, love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. Let us worship God. Let us pray. Great mystery, who creates, sustains, and redeems all life, we come seeking your disturbing presence and comforting peace. We give thanks for the joy of being your people. Awaken us to your indwelling spirit in this worship time and beyond. Help us to hear your word. Open us to the transforming power of your love. Well, the gospel reading for today is John chapter 14, verses 15 to 21. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you will also live. On the day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. And those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. May God bless to our understanding this reading from the Holy Scriptures. May only the truth be spoken, and only the truth be heard. The reading today is another part of what is known as the Farewell Discourse, long Jesus monologues only found in John's Gospel. It's Jesus' farewell address to his disciples, given the night before he dies. It's just so deeply human to want to prepare those whom we have loved to never forget what matters most. And in my experience, the message that most dying impart is about love. Throughout his gospel, John makes it clear that to believe that Jesus is Christ involves abiding in his word, his whole life and teaching, summed up by his command to love. In the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus summed up the entire law and prophets with these words: love God and love others. The Christian message of love God and love neighbor, the very heart of Scripture, is indisputable. In today's passage, Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And just in case the disciples missed his point, in the next chapter, Jesus says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. It's really a simple enough message to understand, but a hard message to live. Considering the history of the Christian church, it's easy to see why many influential theologians and spiritual leaders, such as Rabbi Abraham Heschel, the Dalai Lama, Howard Thurman, Gandhi, and Chief Seattle, to name a few, have confronted the lived spirituality of its followers. A quick review of the last few hundred years is enough to make any of us who identify as Christian humble and deeply contrite. Recall so-called Christian Europe's part in the Holocaust, the African American slave trade, the treatment of indigenous peoples, apartheid, the oppression of and violence against other cultures and races in the name of Christian imperialism. How can any of these horrific actions be ever justified by followers of Jesus? In the words of Christian African-American Howard Thurman, Christianity betrayed Jesus. The word religion, religare, means to bind together. That is the bond between us, our world, and the source of it all. Religion or spirituality helps us find a new level of consciousness that demands an ethical vision. Jesus taught and lived out a vision that respected the inherent dignity and connectedness of all life. The practical implications of his loving the world showed themselves in the 5 non-negotiable practices that were mentioned last week: peacemaking, forgiveness, love of enemy, justice and generosity toward the poor and the outsider, and inclusivity. Love is an action that really doesn't depend on how you feel. It's about doing the right thing, following the way of Jesus. In the name of justice and righteousness, part of the work of love means reconciling the past, redeeming, if we can, the untold harm that has been done. Abraham Heschel once wrote that the biggest sin in the Bible was callousness, hard-heartedness. This pandemic has gifted us with the glaring truth of injustice in its many forms. How the dominant culture treats our most vulnerable, and how much it's willing to sacrifice in order to maintain its way of living. This blasphemous version of Christianity is threatening our very survival as a species and Mother Earth. Our past and our present are before us, and the question we all have to ask at this time is, who do we want to be? What kind of world can we create together? The UN has predicted that because of the pandemic, global poverty rates will rise. 1/2 billion people will be destitute. The number of starving people in the world will double to 265 million in the next year. I confess many times I've wondered what it would take for us to really open our hearts. I ask this because before COVID-19, around 22,000 people died daily, mostly children, from poverty-related diseases, and yet I suspect this ongoing tragedy was rarely a point of conversation. Throw in the global refugee population, around 71 million, the highest number ever recorded, and few want to seriously go there either. Perhaps COVID has captured our attention because no one is immune to the threat of illness or death. No one is safe. And with that fear, most everything we knew has changed. The common lament over the last few weeks has been wanting things to go back to normal, kind of make America great again. But life hasn't been great for much of the world's population. Now is not the time to long for what was, but to envision and work for what ought to be. I get that recovery starts at home, making things better for ourselves and our loved ones. My hope is that it doesn't end there. My hope is that this experience will move us to be more grateful, more generous, and more aware of the suffering of others. And that awareness moves us to speak up, stand up, or do something for those denied basic human rights. It's hard to name things that seem at this time to be background noise. Maybe one more thing to have to think about or do. But that divine command to love God and love others is not just if we have time. It's foundational to who we are as people of God. Creation shares in the same stardust, breath, light, the very loving energy that makes it all go. Everything is relation, regardless of place or race or anything else that keeps us from seeing ourselves and the divine in others. We are all a part of the great mystery. The only way to move away from the dominant culture's grasp on us, that worldly power that tells us that our merit lies in achievement, acquisition, and social standing, is to be grounded in that divine awareness that sees all as relations, worthy of respect and deserving the fullness of life. Sadly, the allure of personal comfort and security is relentless in its call. I don't know about you, but I seem to need constant reminding and encouragement about what is possible when we choose to risk loving beyond kith and kin. A few days ago, a friend of mine sent me a podcast interview on Sounds True with Benedictine nun, author and teacher Joan Chittister. The podcast is called Presence and Perpetual Goodness. Joan sees the Christian story as the story of God's love and goodness. Creation is a sign of goodness. Goodness and the fullness of development is the very mind of God. Everything God does is potentially good, and humankind is free to either nurture or destroy that goodness. In every moment, that choice of how to respond is ours. We are not alone in our choice. The Spirit is with us always to guide us, give us courage, wisdom, and strength. Jesus assures his disciples in today's passage that he will not leave them orphaned, but send an advocate, a Spirit, to be with them forever. And our spiritual ancestors are here too to help us along our way. Many of their voices I find in their poetry and writing. One of those voices is Bengali poet Tagore. If you haven't tired of my poetry choices, I would like to share this brief poem by him called The Grasp of Your Hand. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Let me not crave an anxious fear to be saved, but hope for the patience to win my freedom. Grant me that I may not be a coward, feeling your mercy in my success alone, but let me find the grasp of your hand in my failure. The one existence the wise call by many names, Holy One, Creator, the Great Mystery, Allah, the ultimate reality, whatever name serves best, is where those with spiritual awareness turn to for their comfort, strength, courage, patience, or whatever is needed to keep them open, generous, and grounded in the moment. Just over 63 years ago, Joan Chittister, the spiritual teacher I mentioned earlier, was given a little red book called Abandonment to Divine Providence. She credits that book with teaching her about the sacrament of the present moment. In it, there's a brief prayer, a prayer for a happy death that she adapted slightly and turned into a regular practice. In fact, she repeats this prayer anytime she's faced with a challenging moment. It helps her to see God in the moment and to surrender to whatever unfolds. The prayer goes like this: O Lord Jesus Christ, at this moment I do accept from thy hands, with a quiet and trusting heart, whatsoever deaths thou shalt choose to send me, with all their pains and griefs. It may seem like an odd prayer to offer, certainly not like prayers most people pray. Prayers can sound like wish lists full of wants and directives to God. This prayer teaches freedom from the ego or small self and aligns our true nature with God's. In this prayer lies a peace that comes with trusting that all will work out for good. Practices and daily rituals help expand our hearts and kindle a trust in divine presence and perpetual goodness. May our hearts be grounded in that divine awareness that sees all as relations worthy of respect and deserving the fullness of life. May our life reflect God's love and goodness in all we say and do. I'll close our time together with a final blessing. May the God who dances in creation, who embraces us with human love, who shakes our lives like thunder, bless us and drive us out with power to fill the world with her justice. Go forth remembering who you are and to whom you belong.